Hello and welcome to Learn Spanish a lo Boricua. It's time for class. Ustedes ya saben la que hay. Today we're going to be going over the conversation we had in the previous episode, which was called El primer tatuaje de Alfredo. We're going to be looking at some of the vocab that came up, a lot of which was related to tattoos, different body parts, things related to the pain, the overall experience of getting a tattoo. We're going to look at some quotes from the episode, kind of break those down, look at some of the grammar, so that you can use those in the future as well. And I'm going to give you some examples of autocorrecting. We're going to talk about making mistakes in Spanish and how that's just a reality and kind of how to deal with it even as an advanced speaker. As always, I recommend that you view today's episode on YouTube. You really need the visual piece in order to retain and learn properly the new vocab. I'm finding this in Italian. I'm listening to an audio where they feed you vocab little by little. And I hate that I can't easily look at the new vocab that I'm learning. I need to be able to see it to make sure that I'm pronouncing it correctly and for it to really latch on to my brain. So please view the episode. Take some time. It's only going to be about half an hour. You could do it in two separate sessions, 15 minutes and 15 minutes. I guarantee you can find two 15-minute sessions to sit down with this episode and actually learn from it. All right. You'll notice that I'm in a different environment today. I'm back home visiting family. We'll be here for a few weeks. Want to do a long trip at least once a year where I get some good time with people beyond just the the immediate family. Some of my friends, my extended family, and etc. Okay? All right, I think those are all of our PSAs. As always, please subscribe on YouTube. Give this video a like. This will help get this podcast out to more people. You can make sure you follow on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google, wherever it is that you're listening. If there's an option to give a 5-star rating, please do so. Again, that helps me get this out to more people. And if you're enjoying it, I believe other people will too, who have a connection to Puerto Rico and are trying to brush up or start learning Spanish. Let's get into it. Starting with the most basic, el tatuaje. It's right there in the name of the episode. The way to say a tattoo is el tatuaje. Notice it's masculine. I'm going to always be, and you'll notice this with Spanish vocab as well, that they're going to include the article with nouns, right? Please, people, places, things. These are also ideas. Things like freedom is la libertad. So all nouns have a gender. You're going to notice that they always include, when you're learning the word el or la, you should be including that on your flashcards. They will be included in the flashcards that we have created for you guys so that you know that you're learning as you learn the word what gender the word is. Okay, and a note on the Quizlet decks, we have them ready. I'm going to be reviewing them and they'll be posted in the next week or so. I mentioned on the last episode that for our Patreon page, we're not only providing transcripts of the conversations, we're also creating Quizlet decks with all of the vocab that I go over in these class episodes. And they will be organized into their episodes, most especially as I started getting about halfway through the episodes that we have. We're on 26 now. I would say about by 10 or 12, I was starting to organize vocab into the categories, into what the episode was about, whether it's about movies or gym, etc. So you're going to have kind of categories and also a memory of the conversation to help your brain latch on to these new words. All right. So check out our Patreon page, just $5 a month. It would mean so much to us to have that little bit of support coming in for the amount of work that we put into this podcast. And it'll be a great benefit for you to have both transcripts and pre-made Quizlet decks that is purely puertorriqueño, right? This es the vocabulario es aprobado por puertorriqueños. Puerto Rican approved vocab. It's what I'm most comfortable, the type of vocab I'm most comfortable teaching at this point. All right, so we mentioned el tatuaje, quick little tangent there, but sign up for a Patreon, get those vocab decks, have the work done for you. You just sit down, open them up, start to study. Done. Okay. All right. Right at the beginning of this conversation, I explained that Alfredo came home. It was a surprise. He didn't tell me that was what he was doing. He had something new on his arm. He got his primer tatuaje, and I said, "Bienvenido al club de los maleantes." Obviously, joking. Maleante is a thug, a criminal. I'm just playing into the stereotype, as you guys can see. And as we've talked about in the podcast, I have quite a few. Doesn't make you a thug or criminal. It's just a joke. Maleante. Know that that's like saying a thug, a criminal. All right. Alfredo described the feeling of getting a tattoo as like muchas hincadas de abejas. Muchas hincadas de abejas. Please tell me you didn't look at this and say hincada. Why didn't you say hincada? Because the H is always silent. Thank you very much. What's the word for jeans in Spanish? In Puerto Rico, excuse me. What's the word for jeans in Puerto Rico? M-A-H-O-N. M-A-H-O-N. That is not pronounced mahon. You are dangerously close to the word mojon, which means a turd. So do not pronounce that H. It's a maun. Maun. Okay? Watch out for those H's, y'all. Do not let your English brain betray you. Muchas hincadas de abejas. It's like a lot of bee stings, right? Really, they use the word picar for when something stings you. Una abeja me picó. But hincada would be like a stabbing pain or a prick. I was a little bit hesitant, and I'm thinking about this also for making these flashcard decks, putting the word prick on there. We rarely in the United States, I say, would just use prick alone because that is almost exclusively used for pretty strong insult, right? Think of this. I didn't want to specifically say pin prick because it's not referring to a pin prick, but that's probably what we would choose to say in this situation. The feeling of a pin prick, it's a stabbing pain. Okay, think of it. Bee sting, stabbing pain, a pin prick type of thing. That's what an hincada is describing, right? Know if you see that on the card later, hopefully you will have the memory of that this is not the insult. I clarify that on the card as well. All right. La aguja. The way you say a needle is aguja. It's got an H in I'm sorry, it's got a J. Later in this episode, I'm going to be talking about making mistakes, and I am going to point out the fact that we do that in English, like how I'm doing it right now. It's okay. It's natural. Not even in your native language are you perfect. La aguja has a J, which makes sure that you are pronouncing it that last syllable as ha. Aguja, la aguja is a needle. Yeah, that got mentioned a couple times in the episode. La tinta. Tinta is ink. Tinta. T-I-N-T-A. La tinta. All right, we've got the word sombra. I knew this as shade or shadow, okay? If you're going to sit in the shade at the beach, vas a buscar la sombra en la playa, right? Also, your shadow is also a sombra. Third meaning that I learned was when I got este tatuaje de las flores de flamboyán en el hombro, okay? And she talked about la sombra, the shading, okay? So at least in Puerto Rico as well, and I checked this on SpanishDictionary.com as well, that sombra also has shading as one of its possible definitions. Okay, so sombra, one word to say it all: shade, shadow, and shading. Muy bien. La servilleta. I mentioned that as a tattoo artist starts to finish the tattoo, they usually pass or what we would say, they would wipe you down with a napkin or a paper towel. Really, it's a paper towel. They start to wipe it down so they get the excess of ink. They can look at, their work and put on the final touches, right? Look at this guy right here in the picture. He's got la servilleta. However, you might have learned, as I did, that servilleta is a napkin. Often in Puerto Rico, they will use that word both for napkin and paper towel. And here's the hard way that I found that out. I went to Walgreens, maybe about my first year or so in Puerto Rico. The lady waiting on me let me know that they had a special, I think it was 2 por 1, okay? 2 por 1 servilletas, right? 2 for 1. So you get 2 giant packs for the price of 1. Excellent. I was like, yes, I do need napkins. So de hecho, sí, voy a aprovechar de esa oferta. She brought me servilletas. Were they napkins? No. I ended up going home with about 24 fucking rolls of paper towels. I thought we were talking about napkins. I didn't need paper towels. I needed napkins. Okay, so that's when I learned. And since then, many experiences of people just using the word servilleta for the catch-all, napkin, paper towel, whatever. It's the thing that wipes things down, gets things clean. They use servilleta for everything. It doesn't mean that you won't ever hear papel toalla. Papel toalla. Literally, paper towel, exactly in the order that your English brain would want to say it. I also thought it would be al revés, but no, I got corrected. I got a little chuckle out of Alfredo when I said toalla papel. Nope, This is one that's said just like we say it in English, you know? This language never ceases to amaze me. Papel toalla is absolutely used for paper towels. I'm not saying that you won't hear it, but you will also hear servilleta as a catch-all. Muy bien. Okay, so that you don't have to the same confusion while you're in Walgreen in Puerto Rico. Okay, we've got sensible. Does it look like sensible? It's not what it means. It means sensitive. Sensible. Se siente bien sensible. It feels really sensitive afterwards. Okay? Watch out for that one. It's kind of a false friend. Sensible is how you say sensitive. Okay, now, of course, parts of the body came up as we were talking about, first of all, different areas where I have, or where my tattoos are, as well. We were talking about my friend who has a lot, and we were saying, you know, I was surprised to learn that he thought for him personally, the most sensitive area was el bíceps. Okay, so we talked about quite a few parts of the body, whether or not you wanted to learn body part vocab. If you're going to be fluent, you need it all. You need to learn it all. I know that it seems overwhelming with vocab. I know that there's things that don't seem like priority right now, but you might as well start filing these things away in your long-term memory, because if you're going to be fluent, you need it all. Here we go. El antebrazo. We have gone over brazo now in a couple episodes. Brazo is our arms. Abrazar, to hug. All works very nice. El antebrazo would be your forearm. Pretty straightforward. Antebrazo. El antebrazo. Masculine, just like brazo is. Okay. El costado. I want to clarify this. So el costado is used most often in this with yoga. Right. Got very familiar with very comfortable with my anatomy terms because I teach yoga multiple times a week in Puerto Rico, and I've been doing that now for nearly 3 years. Okay, el costado refers to the side body, the part that is your torso. Okay, I'm not talking about the whole right side of my body from head to toe. In that part, in that context, they're going to use el lado. El lado derecho del cuerpo would be my whole right side. I'm talking from my forehead down to my right foot. El lado derecho del cuerpo. El lado izquierdo del cuerpo is going to be my left side of the body. Again, from the tip of my head down to the sole of my foot. Whole left side of my body. When they are talking about el costado, they're referring to your side, the side body of your torso, basically your ribs. What I would typically refer to, either you could call side body, or a lot of times in yoga, I would refer to your ribs. In Spanish, you're going to use that as costado. That's not just Puerto Rico, as far as I understand. Okay, so know that. Know the difference of lado is going to be referring to, you could draw a line dividing your whole body. Costado is referring to your torso. Okay, the side of your torso, el costado. All right, also las costillas. That's also used to talk about ribs, not only anatomically, but also food-wise. If you're going to go somewhere and order ribs, you would be ordering costillas. Works the same in Spanish as it does in English. All right, el costado is the side of your body, el costado derecho, el costado izquierdo. You have costillas as ribs. All right, we've got el muslo, which in Puerto Rico more sound like el muslo. Muslo. A little bit of a breath out for the S instead of a strong S sound. El muslo is your thigh. And you're referring to your thigh. It's not particularly your quadricep, right? We talked about quadricep in probably the episode before, right? El episodio anterior sobre el gym. This is just referring to thigh. This is also both anatomically and food-wise. If you were talking about chicken thighs, you're going to see el muslo de pollo. Okay? We've got el pecho. El pecho is your chest. We talked about that as well. Again, I think I was talking about my friend and his many tattoos. Seguimos. My first tattoo was in el omoplato. El omoplato. Omoplato is a shoulder blade. Okay, el omoplato. You can also say this, la escápula. Escápula. That's your scapula. We say both things in English, right? Scapula is a little bit more anatomical phrase. Shoulder blade would be the more common way to say that. El omoplato, la escápula. En español también. Okay? Omoplato, escápula. Notice that you have an accent on escápula, so you need to lift on ka. Escápula. We have your foot. My third tattoo was on my foot. El pie. It's not pie. It's pie. To make it plural, los pies. This is also what you use for measurement. And in Puerto Rico, they do measure in feet, thank God. Because I would be so lost if somebody told me their height in meters. Like, I don't know. You could be a basketball player. You could be the size of my 3-year-old niece. I don't know. when you tell me in meters. Okay, so in feet, you would say, yo mido, I measure. They use the measure for how tall you are. So the verb is medir, medir, medir. It's an I, stem changing one, just like the verb pedir, medir, pedir. Pido is I ask for or I order. Mido is I measure. That's how tall I am. Mido 5 pies, right? That should be plural, but usually the S is going to be just aspirated. In Puerto Rico, it doesn't like 5 pies. Probably doesn't like 5 pies. 5 pies y una pulgada. 5-1. Really, most of the times you can just say it like we would in English, where you would say 5 for me. I'm a little shrimp, y'all. 5-1. Yup. You'll see that later in a picture that I'm sharing in this episode as well. Okay, I'm 5'1". You can say mido 5'1". But they're going to use pies, feet, and inches are pulgadas. Pulgadas, pulgadas. Okay, pies y pulgadas. All right, we talked about the couple people that we know who have, well, he talked about one person specifically who has a tattoo on their throat. I know another gal who has the same thing. La garganta. Your throat is la garganta. Garganta. All right, and speaking of which, Adam's apple is just what you would expect it to be in Spanish. This kind of made me laugh when I first heard it. La manzana de Adán. La manzana de Adán. Okay, the Adam's apple. And that just made me want to share a song with you guys. This song by Paulo Londra. I think he might be Argentinian, and he has a song about Adán y Eva. It's pretty fun, so I'm just going to play maybe the first 20 seconds.
Acércate, deja la duda. La noche fría, pero conmigo asegura. Despégate de la amargura y déjame llevarte a tu debida altura. De tus locuras, de tus ideas, de tu cultura y de tu ciencia. La alcanzaré, eso no lo sé, pero esta noche de mí no te escapas. Esta noche no me guardo las palabras. Soñé siempre con tener esta velada. Y que tengo que contarte a ti, que de mí no te escapas. Esta noche no me guardo las palabras. Soñé siempre con tener esta velada. Y que tengo que contarte a ti. Como Adán y Eva tengamos nuestro pecado. Como dos ladrones un secreto.
Como Adán y Eva tengamos nuestros pecados. So just like Adam and Eve, let's have our sins. Ooh. Okay. So go check that song out. It's pretty fun. Adán y Eva, Adam and Eve. All right, let's get into some quotes. I want to take a look at these a little bit more carefully, things that you can use in Puerto Rico. Okay, that came up in the episode. First of all, the phrase, by the way, is used in Puerto Rico, and it's usually pronounced like that. By the way, something like that. Okay, a little more Boricua-sized. By the way, but people will throw that in all the time. That is one of the Spanglish that is commonly used here. By the way. Okay, Alfredo, so it's pretty straightforward, but it might not be something that you realize you can use. La muchacha hizo un gran trabajo. La muchacha hizo un gran trabajo. The girl did a great job. We've got the verb hacer, to make or to do, in the past tense. That would be hizo, correct? Un gran trabajo makes it a great job. Gran trabajo. Okay, so maybe you didn't know how to say did a great job. And that would be, if you're talking about he, she, or usted, it would be hizo un gran trabajo. La muchacha hizo un gran trabajo. And she did. All right, Alfredo talked about how, and I wanted to bring this back up because this is a Puerto Rican slang that we've talked about in a previous episode. It came up in maybe the Super Mario's brother. Super Mario was in Spanish and then Brothers was in English. Super Mario Brothers movie, where we talked about la fiebre, and I went over how in Puerto Rico that's used as when you're hooked on something or when you're on a kick. Okay, so he's saying that, remember, I've talked about as well in this podcast about how where we might in English say, you get hooked, in Spanish, they're not going to use the pronoun tú in a lot of those examples. They're going to say uno when one does something. It sounds very formal in English, but that's just the natural way to talk about somebody without naming them specifically when we're using the you in general. I'm not saying you specifically. So they're going to opt for that uno. So le entra una fiebre a uno is the quote that Alfredo said. Le entra una fiebre a uno. He's saying that this fever kind of enters into you, right? Or comes into you, comes over you, as we might say. More likely, again, it's really just translates kind of to you get hooked, or you kind of get this like addiction to the idea of wanting another tattoo, etc. After your first one, you're already thinking about the next one. We said that exact quote. Ya estás pensando en el próximo. Right, in the next one. Okay, so le entra una fiebre a uno that you have this desire to get more tattoos afterwards. Bringing back the slang una fiebre, this idea that you're hooked on something, that you're on a kick. Okay, Alfredo, talking about the tattoo that this guy at the gym has on his neck, he said, se ve bien exagerado. Se ve bien exagerado. Okay, exagerado is used, obviously that does mean exaggerated, okay? Exagerar is the verb to exaggerate. However, this is a slang term in Puerto Rico, and it's usually going to be something very positive. So let's skip down for a second here to bien exagerado. I like to define slang with slang. So you could think of it as it's dope. I mean, I think at least for us millennials, say that. What are the Gen Zers saying these days? I don't know. But in my day, we said dope. Okay, or it's fire, it's awesome, something that would be a slang for amazing and awesome. Bien exagerado. Okay, se ve, I have a video on this I posted a while ago. Se ve, you've heard this 1,000 times in reggaeton, whether or not you snap to it, or maybe not se ve, but also te ves. Okay, it's the same structure, only instead of commenting on it looks or he or she looks, they're saying you look. Te ves bien dura. That's you look hot. You look so hot. That's what that is. Te ves. Okay, so you use verse, you use the verb ver reflexively to comment on appearance. Me veo. That's how it would be if it was in yo. Me veo cansada. I look tired. Te ves excelente. You look excellent. Okay, se ve bien exagerado. It looks at this, it could work also for he or she, but in context, we know he was talking about the tattoo. Se ve bien exagerado. Okay, so that's definitely one that you should write down, be observant to, check reggaeton lyrics, and keep noticing it to feel more confident with that structure. All right. Last one I wanted to go over was using the verb caer to say that something falls on. And you could do this for dates, for example. When I talked about the music festival, that would always fall or always fell on my birthday weekend. So I said el festival caía en el fin de semana de mi cumpleaños. Okay, el festival caía, I'm using the imperfect tense because it's over a long period of time, right? It wasn't just one weekend that this happened. It was many years that, I myself in the face, many years that this festival fell on my birthday. So caía en el fin de semana de mi cumpleaños. The festival fell on my birthday weekend. Okay? That's a good kind of little tip to know for falling on something when you're falling when referring to dates or events. Write that one down, review it. All right. And to conclude, I would like to talk real quick with you guys about making mistakes. Next year, it will be 20 years that I've been studying Spanish. 20 years. Here I am. Here's a little Carrie, back when my hair was curly, which happened for about 7 years of my life, in Guatemala when I was 18 years old. Okay? I studied one-on-one with a tutor there. I had already been studying Spanish for 4 years. After this, I went on to college. I studied Spanish for another 4 years. I studied abroad. After graduating, I worked in a nonprofit that served immigrants. I had Spanish resources constantly around me, although I wasn't practicing speaking really. I wasn't using the language actively, but I still was involved in Spanish. Okay, so I started when I was 14. Next year I will be 34. It'll be 20 years that I have been studying Spanish. Not only am I bilingual, I can explain to you the grammar of nearly any sentence in Spanish, okay? Which I can't do for you in English, by the way. Also, English is my native language, and I still say some whack shit in English. So much so that my dance students made me a notebook full of famous mistakes, famous carryisms that I made in class. Here I am with my students. That's me in the center. You'll notice that I'm the same height as my 12-year-old students. Okay, I'm the one holding the flowers. Hard to see me? Yes, I look like a child. Mido 5'1". I'm 5'1". Okay. I have this notebook right here, right? Once I told, instead of point their feet, I told them to point their feet. That's usually my particular brand of making mistakes in English, is that I will switch the first two letters of words in a phrase. For my advanced ballet class, at the end, we were going over how they were going to exit off the stage. Obviously, they're going to do a curtsy, but they had their nice long skirts. And what did that come out as? It came out as a skirtsy. Okay. And they wrote little notes. Everyone remembers this. Whether it was one particular dancer that would contribute a quote of mine, or whether it was the whole freaking studio that remembers this mistake. Well, many people remember point your Pete, I'll tell you that much. Okay? So you're not even perfect in your native language. As I just talked about earlier, I made many mistakes during this podcast in English. Does that mean that I can't speak English? Definitely not. Does it mean that I'm not fluent in English? I can promise you that I am. Get over the fact that you make mistakes in Spanish because you do it in your native language as well. You will never be perfect. You will never be perfect. However, many of you do want to know the right way to speak, and you will succeed in learning the right way to say things, but you'll still make mistakes. You know the right way to say things in English, you still make mistakes. Just correct yourself. Move on like you would in English, or laugh at yourself like you would in English. It's hilarious. I said skirtsy, it made me laugh. Once another one told me I said pursed position instead of first position. You know, it makes me laugh. It doesn't make me feel like I'm not good at English when I make a mistake. What happens is we have so much more self-judgment when we do that in our second language. It's because of me. It's because I'm not good enough yet, right? In English, sometimes we can't hear somebody well enough to understand them, or we didn't understand what somebody said. Does that mean we're not fluent in English? Hell no. In that case, we usually put the blame on the other person. They were talking soft, they were too far away, they were mumbling, whatever. It's their fault. What happens when that happens to us in English, in Spanish, excuse me, when it's our second language and we can't understand something, it's me. It's because of me. It's because it's not my native language. It's because me falta todavía. Sometimes you just can't hear the person freaking well enough. Yeah, move on. Stop being so self-critical. All right? Here are 4 times that I autocorrected during the last episode. I can tell you the rules. I've been doing this for 20 freaking years. I still make mistakes. All I do is correct myself and move on. Example. Number 1, I said quería estar 100% segura. To say that you want to be sure of something is estar segura. This was a ser. I started ser was the first thing that came out of my mouth. I know that it's supposed to be estar. I just fixed it. Moved on. Okay, this happened again with ser and estar. This is in the past subjunctive, fuera and estuviera. Okay, I said I didn't want it to be on a place in my body, so that was a location. That's estar, not ser. You use estar for location. If I'm referring to a certain part of the body that I wanted it to be on, I needed to use estar. I just correct myself. No quería que fuera, que estuviera en un sitio, on a place, super visible, I think is what I said there. Okay, and I talked about my sister and I both having the same tattoo with the same one, that not wanting it to be super visible because it's kind of a silly tattoo, right? Ella y yo los dos. And I said, ella y yo las dos. We're both women. We need to be referred to as las. The two of us would be las when we're both women. I just corrected myself, put a little more emphasis. Ella y yo los dos. Ella y yo las dos. Right? Correct myself. Okay, and finalmente. This last example, you cannot in Spanish end a sentence with a preposition. I think that technically we're not supposed to do this in English either, but I don't teach English for a reason, so don't ask me. We say things like, first of all, let's talk about prepositions, are your little small connecting words. Think of on, with, about, for, to, at. Okay, in Spanish, things like con, sin, por, a, de, en, etc. Para. You can't end a thought with one of those. So what I was going to say as I started this sentence was, I'm going to give you guys an example that I hope you can identify with. In English, the with comes all the way at the end, right? Think of another couple examples. I don't have anyone to practice with. The person, well, she was the person I lived with. And I don't have, yeah, that's sufficient, okay? Or like about is another one we could do. We didn't have anything to talk about. We end sentences in that. So your English brain is going to have a hard time generating that preposition earlier on in the phrase. That's all right. I just stop and start over again and put it where it needed to go. I realized almost at the end of the sentence that I was about to end with con. I'm going to give you, les voy a poner un ejemplo que espero que se identifiquen con. That cannot happen, and I know that. So I got all the way to identify before I realized, back up. This needs to go, they're usually going to go before the que, okay? No tengo nadie con quien practicar. No tengo a nadie con quien practicar. Con quien practicar. Con qué practicar. You would already have learned this in some basic questions like ¿a dónde? ¿A dónde vas? Where are you going to? The a starts the whole thing. ¿En qué trabajas? What do you work in? Or where do you work at? Well, they're not using where, but they put en all the way at the beginning. ¿En qué trabajas? ¿A dónde vas? The way you get better at this, just you might not necessarily produce it correctly the first time, but you will know that you've made a mistake once you realize you've gotten to the end of the sentence and you can just start over again. That's what I do. So I started this. This is what it sounded like in the podcast. Les voy a poner un ejemplo que espero que se identifique. Les voy a poner un ejemplo con que espero que se identifiquen. Normal. Okay? It doesn't naturally occur to me to put that there. It's better. Some things just come out automatically with that structure, but sometimes it doesn't. I just correct myself and move on. It doesn't mean that I'm not a badass in Spanish, because I absolutely am. If you're listening on the podcast, I just did a hair flip, even though my hair's up. Okay. You're going to make mistakes. Correct yourself. Get over it. It doesn't have to do with the fact that you're not an advanced speaker, because advanced speakers will do it too. Fluent native speakers will do it as well. Muy bien. All right, everybody, thank you. Please like and follow on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok at Carrie B. We've got our patreon.com Spanish with Carrie for you to get those transcripts of our conversation episodes and those pre-made decks of the vocab that you learned today and in all other class episodes. Hasta la próxima.